Welcome back, everybody. Okay, we've covered the Central. We've covered the Atlantic. We're now on to the Metro Division, and we've got three contributors here from the Hockey Raiders to do all of this and talk with us about a number of teams in this division. Kristy's with us, Matt's with us, Mark's with us. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves, plug whatever you want to plug, if it's your Twitter or Instagram or whatever you want to plug. I'm going to let you do that and then talk about what you're working on, hopefully some of it related to the trade deadline, because that is what this show is about. Kristy, I'll start with you. You cover the Devils. Let everybody know where they can find your stuff and what are you working on? Are you talking about anything specific to the trade deadline right now?
Okay. As of right now, I am not. I do have a couple articles in the works, but I kind of back down a little bit from the trade deadline. You can find me on Twitter at @instalettos_NHL. It's always a good time. And yeah, I have a couple things in the work, background behind the scenes with MSG Networks, which does the broadcast for the Devils. So that's kind of exciting. And a couple players are coming back to the lineup. So stay tuned.
So let me ask you this. If you're not really focusing on the trade deadline a lot in your articles, is that because you're not a huge, like, you don't love the, like, I love the trade deadline. It's like,
I know you do.
It's like totally my jam, right? Like I absolutely love trades and rumors and speculation, because if you follow my stuff, you know, this is what I do. But so it is your preference more to not go near that stuff? Is that why? Or is there just not a lot of activity in New Jersey right now to talk about?
So I guess a little bit of both. I did a couple trade deadline profiles on players that could potentially be moved, but it's not, I don't know. I'm not really one that is really good on guessing returns and stuff like that. So I kind of just shy away from it a little bit and kind of stick to my knack of telling stories. But the Devils are an interesting team to watch at the trade deadline. I feel like there's not going to be a lot of movement, but they're a team that could potentially make a big splash if the right opportunity presents itself for our general manager.
Yeah, I've heard that Fitzgerald is not, he's selling, but he's not like selling like a traditional seller might sell. Is that correct? Like he's sort of really looking at who he picks up. He's not going near a ton of contracts. He's not thinking full on rebuild. He's got a young group of really talented potential stars in his roster, and he wants to accent that is the word I'm looking for. Is that an accurate read on the situation in New Jersey, you think?
I think that is accurate. I don't think I would technically label them as sellers. I think it's going to be kind of like a Blake Coleman situation where I don't think he's really actively shopping people. I know, Subban's not going to come back. So obviously if we can get something for him, that would be great. His contract's obviously a little bit of an issue, but I think it might be just like a Coleman where if the right situation presents itself where it can help the team in the long run, I think he's going to take it, but I don't think he's actively making calls to kind of dump players and contracts. It's a young team. We're on the right track. That's kind of where he is.
I was going to ask you about Subban because there's a guy that there's a lot of talk floating around about what could happen there. And they have said, we've seen reports that he's been told he's not going to be re-signed or extended. I don't know if that means at all that there's just no chance that he's coming back, but I'm assuming he's going to move on to do something else.
Yeah.
So do you expect that they are trying to actively trade him, or are they just at a point now where they're kind of like, we don't think we can, he's going to walk. We're okay that he does. What do you think happens with him before Monday, if anything?
I think Fitzgerald said he might put some calls into teams to see what they need, but I think he also realizes that if Subban is going to be moved, obviously we're going to have to retain some money there. But yeah, other than that, he is going to walk, I think, at free agency because the team is not going to re-sign him. So if you can get something for him, that would be great. I'm just not sure where the best fit would be for him for this situation. It would need to be a team that would just need a depth piece, but not. It would be a depth piece is really what it would come down to. So it would be interesting to see where he would potentially fit in.
If we put aside the money factor, do you think there is a team that would look at him and say, based on the way that he's played the last couple of seasons, that he could be somebody that could help them in a playoff run?
On the ice, I'm actually going to say Boston kind of intrigues me a little bit because they definitely need help on the blue line. So that's a little intriguing. And the fact that they're already aging, they wouldn't really have to commit to Subban long-term. So it would kind of just be a rental to see what he can do. Montreal fans wouldn't be too happy with that, but that's kind of the team that jumps out. I mean, I guess Calgary too would be an interesting, because I know they're looking for a depth defenseman as well, but it would be a shame for them not to bring back Giordano at that point.
Yeah, well, we've heard, and we'll talk about this in our Pacific Division chatter a little bit, that Sean Monahan's name is out there too, just to clear some money, right? To see if maybe they can make another move here, because they are a team that wants to get active here. That's an interesting situation in New Jersey. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. Do you believe that they're going to be less active now, but more active in the offseason? Is that your expectation here?
Yes, I think the main focus for the Devils right now is goaltending. I think anything else would just kind of be icing on top of the cake. Right now, I think their main focus is goaltending.
Cool. Okay, perfect. Excellent rundown to start things off. Matt, I'm going to move over to you. You cover the Rangers, also the Devils a little bit, so you're welcome to add anything to that topic of Devils conversation. But what are you thinking? Where can people find you? What are you working on? Anything specific to the Rangers and the deadline?
You can follow me on Twitter at Matt Grazel. I had an article published today on what the Rangers have in Alexander Giordano. You have their backup. That three teams, the Oilers, Maple Leafs, and the Golden Knights could use him based on their either inconsistencies in goaltending, which is what I've been reading with Edmonton. It's been their issue, or with Toronto and Vegas, it's more an issue of they're dealing with injuries at the position. So
yeah, I can speak to the Oilers. I know well our goaltending situation. Smith's been hit or miss injuries and illnesses. He's back in tonight. He's going to be playing against Buffalo, so we'll see how that one goes. But there's certainly some question marks there. It's just about money. And Georgiev is the name that has popped up when it comes to the Oilers. I don't know how realistic the option is in terms of a trade, whether or not they're looking at that on a more long-term basis, if they were to make that kind of a move, or if they're thinking just let's get us into a rental. We'll take a look at something during the summer. I'm not really sure. But the Rangers have been a team that a lot of people have talked about because they are actively willing to spend some money and are looking to, they're one of the few teams to me that has a good team, a good shot at this, cap space in which to work with. Do you believe the Rangers, because they haven't been active so far, it's Colorado and it's been Florida, it hasn't really been the Rangers yet, which is surprising a lot of people. Do you think something coming here? Is there something happening, impending or imminent for the Rangers before Monday?
Given that some of the rumored targets they were there's speculation to be interested in, Ben Sherratt, the defenseman, and Kelly Jornik, they both were traded. So that's two players who have gone elsewhere. I think it depends. From what I was reading, the Anaheim Ducks, they're for Rickard Reichel. The Ducks won a first-round pick for him, so which is kind of high at the deadline. I mean, it's understandable they want to. If the price is really high, you kind of want to get maybe more than you can for a certain player. But I think the Rangers might back off a bit if that's the case. And they might concentrate on adding more to their bottom six. They traded for the Frank Bacciaroni from Florida. So that was a minor move. So right now I would expect more of the same kind of moves like that. Nothing really to add to the top six, or I mean, they could still add a bottom six defenseman, the Seattle Kraken defenseman Mark Giordano. He's been rumored. He's still a possibility. I did read that he's a Toronto native and he's hoping to go back there. He has a no movement clause, so he kind of gets somewhat of a say into where he wants to go. But so at this point, I would expect only minor moves at the deadline if the Rangers make any.
I'm really kind of intrigued by that team because they're a decent team. They've been in on a lot of conversations. JT Miller was one of them. And then eventually it sounds like JT Miller's not leaving Vancouver, or they're not willing to move him at this point, and they'd be more apt to maybe trade someone like Brock Besser, but we don't really know what's happening in Vancouver. I'm sure we'll talk about that in the Pacific Division too, but the Rangers are going to be a very interesting team to watch. I have a feeling that maybe we'll hear a lot about them over the next few days. Whether they actually make a bunch of moves or not, I don't know, but we're going to hear a lot. We're going to hear them in the background, I think, for a lot of the conversation about some of these bigger names. Mark, I'm going to move over to you. You cover the Columbus Blue Jackets. Let people know where they can find you. If you're working on anything specific, what do you expect to see from the Blue Jackets here?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Mark Scheig. Working on quite a few things for the deadline. I'll actually be at Nationwide Arena on Monday. The Blue Jackets have a practice at 11 o'clock. No game, but obviously with the trade deadline, we're going to be closely monitoring their situation where they've got 3 guys that I think could easily go. And then depending on if other situations come up, they could have others. The big chip is going to be Max Domi, and that's somebody who has played a lot better as of late. his tenure in Columbus since being acquired from the Josh Anderson deal, he's been very inconsistent. And a pending UFA, it doesn't sound like they want to re-sign him, so they want to try to get as much as they can. Seen some reports out there, the Capitals. I could even see a team like Colorado. I could even see a team like Boston be interested in someone who could be a really important depth piece, someone who can add speed to the lineup, someone who can add offense to the lineup. It's not often you can trade for a former 70-point scorer to add to a contender. So there is some appeal there. And even more appealing is the Blue Jackets have all kinds of cap space. So they could act as a third-party broker. They can hold back some of that money and maybe get a little bit of a nicer return, maybe get an upgrade in a prospect. But that's going to be the biggest chip to watch. A couple other names I think are going to be interesting. Dean Kukin is a UFA defenseman who can add depth. I think actually would be a good piece for your Oilers, Jim.
Yeah, I heard that today.
Yeah, I actually wrote about that in February. That I thought he'd be a good fit in Edmonton just because he can play the role of a depth bottom pair defenseman, but can also act as a 7 or 8 as injury insurance, and maybe even cost him like a 6th-round pick, if not maybe even a little bit less. It wouldn't cost much at all. Then the other name we're watching, they're playing the Capitals tonight, is Jonas Korpisalo, the goaltender, who's not had the year he's wanted. Just 6 wins all year. Just hasn't been able to find his footing. He's not the number 1 goaltender anymore. Elvis Mersley can show there. But I wonder if the Vegas Golden Knights, now with the situation with Robin Lehner and his knee injury, are they going to try to go into these playoffs with Brossoit and Thompson in goal? You think they have to be looking. And if they don't want to pay a high premium price, Korpisalo, he's won in the playoffs before. Had that tremendous game against Tampa a couple years ago where he had 80 some odd saves. So question is, can he get that form back? And a lot of teams aren't convinced of it, but there's certainly opportunity there. So that'll definitely be worth watching.
I was going to ask you if you had any sort of read on what you thought other teams might view of some of these guys. Like Max Domi is a really interesting player. When he's effective, he's really effective.
Yes.
And I could see him fitting in Boston. Like that screams the type of team that he would excel on, right?
Absolutely.
Korpisalo had that really good run in the playoffs, but then there's this kind of take now that maybe he's not a starter, that we don't know what he is. And that I even know the Oilers were rumored to have looked at him at one point. Do you get a sense of what some of these other teams are thinking when it comes to the Blue Jackets players? Like, are these assets that are coveted that people really want, or they're more like plan B, plan C type of players?
Well, I think Domi would be a plan B. I think he's kind of not in the tier underneath some of the top names out there. It won't take a 1st-round pick to get him. You could probably get him, say, 2nd, 3rd-round pick, maybe even throw a condition in there. But that's their biggest trade chip right now would be him, just because of everything he brings to the table. Korpisalo is interesting because there are some teams that I think believe that he can still be the goalie from a couple years ago. You got to remember something about Columbus. They give up the most shots in the league. They also give up the most goals in the league. So it's fair to say that he has not had the defense whatsoever in front of him. Put him on a good team like Vegas when they're healthy. Let's see what it is then. That's why I think teams can get him maybe even for a mid to late round pick. Teams aren't going to throw a 1st or 2nd round pick at somebody who hasn't had good numbers in a couple of years. Now, and that's the question they have to answer. He's a former all-star goaltender. Can he get back to that point? And then would he be an upgrade to somebody? And that's the interesting part about Vegas. Who would you rather have? Would you rather have Brossoit starting if Lehner's not coming back? Or would you rather have someone in Korpisalo who's been in that fight before? The other thing that I think doesn't get enough play with him, he's been a number 1 goaltender for the last couple of years. He's lost that. So he hasn't played very much. And in fact, as I'm speaking right now, he gave up another goal, and Elvis Merzlikins is going into the game down 3-0 to Washington. So there actually is a chance that the Blue Jackets could elect to keep him too. So that could go any number of ways, but it won't cost much at all to acquire him.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit on you. What's the story with Patrick Glaney? Here's a guy that we've heard out there, and then we heard is no longer out there because he's played fantastic this season. He had a rebound year. He had some personal stuff that he was dealing with, which obviously affected his season and things like that. What's the story with him? Is he absolutely off the market? He's not going anywhere prior to the deadline. And do you believe that he's probably going to extend here with Columbus?
So I'll say to that, what is the next question? because there is no conversation to be had with this. He is
Yeah.
off the market. He wants to stay in Columbus. Kekalainen's on record as being interested in wanting him to stay in Columbus. The thing they're going to try and figure out is what is the appropriate term and what is the appropriate dollars. But as for any rumors, in fact, he was actually really upset to hear that rumors were out there, vehemently denied all of them. Time to move on to the next conversation when it comes to Patrick Laine.
Good. Well, at least we could put that to rest then, right? We can solidly say we can drop the topic of Patrick Laine, because at the only point that we have to talk about anything is what that number is going to look like.
Yep.
So that's good. That's fantastic news.
Indeed.
All right, Kristy, I'm going to come back to you. Is there a team in this division outside of your own team, New Jersey, that you're kind of watching, think might be a player, might make some moves, will be intriguing over the next few days here?
I'm going to say Carolina. I think Carolina is kind of intriguing. And just for the fact that my team desperately needs a goaltender, I'm also keeping an eye on what's going to happen with Georgiev. I'm curious if they're going to keep him or if they're going to move him around and where he's going to go to. But yeah, Carolina to me is an intriguing team come the postseason.
Carolina is one of those teams that seems to be in every single conversation. Like you hear about Don Waddell sort of lurking in the background on everything, but you don't know if they're actually going to make any moves. They're a really, really solid team. And you know that they want to be in the conversation because they don't want any teams around them doing anything when they don't do anything, but they're pretty good. So I don't know that they need to make a bunch of changes. I'm not sure who you would even move off the roster. It makes it maybe Vincent Trocheck, but like even then, like he's just in all the conversations. I'm just curious to see if he does anything. Matt, what about you? Is there a team outside of the Rangers or the Devils that you're kind of keeping an eye on here in this division?
I think what Philadelphia ends up doing is going to be interesting based on they've been rumored to be sellers for the last couple for quite a while, and just to see where Claude Giroux goes, if he ends up going anywhere. There's been at least 5 guys who've been rumored to go to different places throughout that team, so that should be interesting to keep an eye on. I think Washington will be interesting as well, just because not certain if they're sold on their if they're heading to the playoffs, if they're satisfied with their goaltending situation. They always seem to be in the market for a good goaltender, especially if they got rid of Holtby or Holtby left. It doesn't seem to be a solid number one with that franchise.
Yeah, it will be interesting. Maybe Mark will have more clarification on whether Korpisalo is on Washington's radar at all. But Philadelphia, their name has come up in a number of the divisions that we've covered already. Justin Braun is out there for a few teams, and there's some players there that could get on the move. And as we are watching, as you mentioned, Claude Giroux is the big name here to kind of keep an eye on. Mark, what about you? Any teams that you're actively kind of like, I wonder what they're going to do out of this division?
Yeah, there's 3, and Matt just got done mentioning Washington. I think Vanecek's played really, really well as of late. So that's now all of a sudden an interesting decision. Do they trust Vanecek to go into the playoffs like this, knowing that the Caps are only going to have a couple more shots at this thing? Or do they, make the big splash, maybe try to acquire a Marc-Andre Fleury? Even though I don't think Fleury will ultimately go to the Capitals if he wants to end up back with the Penguins at some point. I think they need help. They could use a depth piece. They can also have to make a decision on the goaltending. So that's one. The Islanders are another one. Zdeno Chara. I mean, do you feel like the Islanders? I wonder if he would honestly go. It'd be storybook stuff if it end up being back in Boston somehow. But that would be one guy. Zach Parise. I know there's some stuff out there about him. Does he want to come back to the Islanders next year? I think he does, but there's still a couple guys that they have to make decisions on. And the Penguins too. They're obviously all in. Malkin and Crosby are doing their thing again. But Kasperi Kapanen is somebody who has struggled vastly on that team, and they could certainly use another winger, I believe, to play on Malkin's line. So are they able to acquire a top 6 forward to be able to add to that group? I think Hextall might be looking in that direction. So there's definitely something interesting going on in the Metro all the time, especially given the Capitals are pretty much looking to win the Cup, the Penguins, the Carolina Hurricanes. That is a tough division. We haven't even gone to the Rangers yet, and Shesterkin can steal a series or two. So no shortage.
There's a lot of teams in this division that are on that what are we going to do next year conversation. Like if we don't do it this year, when's the next shot we're going to get at this thing? Like Pittsburgh's in that conversation, Washington's in that conversation. There's a lot of teams that have some aging players that, this window is shortening and rather quickly. So it'll be interesting. I'm with you. If Kapanen moves out of Pittsburgh, expect Pittsburgh to do something. Like if they can shake that money, I expect them to do something. I think Philly's going to sell. I don't know what's going on with Washington. And I'm not sure if they're comfortable with their goaltending or not, but Oilers are in that same situation. There's a lot of teams in that situation where they're just like, we don't know if we can trust our goaltending, but what are you going to do? There's only so many goaltenders available, right? So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting few days because it hasn't been busy yet, but it could pick up. And maybe the Metro is going to be one of those divisions where a lot of action happens.
Yep.
Awesome, guys. I'm going to let you go. I appreciate you coming on to talk about your division. Kristy, Matt, Mark, thank you for doing that. If we get the chance, probably after the deadline is over, we get an opportunity to talk about what your teams did. I'd love to have you guys back on to chat about that.
Thank you.
Sure. Jim, appreciate the time.